Hey everybody, welcome back to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. This is Ethan Nash with you today, and we are continuing our tour of the 4 different behavior styles. So we've covered analyzers a few weeks ago, then we covered promoters, last week we covered our conductors, and this week we are covering our final style, which is our listeners. And so if you haven't already, go back and listen to those previous episodes, or at the very least, listen to episode number 1 in this series about the analyzers, where I give a little bit of a preamble on what our behavioral styles model is, what it isn't, some caveats, and how to best use it for team and personal effectiveness. Now, this behavioral styles model is a tool we use throughout a lot of the work that we do with teams and organizations, and just really helping people create a common language in terms of how to communicate with different people, how to make adjustments to be as effective as possible in collaboration with others, and so much more. So let's jump into our listeners today. Now, with each one of these behavioral styles, we have 7 organizing principles to describe the style. Think of these as this style's wants, needs, and expectations. And again, this is about how this style tends to show up to other people, how they're perceived by other people, which is not necessarily the same thing as how they feel about themselves. Now, would we agree that it's true that the way we show up to others is not always the same about how I'm feeling? And so that's why here we're focusing on how we show up, because I think that's valuable information for us to all understand. So as you're listening to this part about the listeners, think about, hey, does this style make sense for you? Like, might this be your primary or secondary style? And if it's not, be thinking about people in your life that have this style and how to best communicate with them and be effective with them. So let's jump into this. So the 7 organizing principles for our listeners are: number 1, harmony. Number 2, to help others. Number 3 is appreciation. And number 4 is opportunities to express empathy. And number 5 is low pressure decision making, aka time to process. And number 6 is security. And number 7 is fairness. All right, let's jump into each one of these individually, starting with number 1, harmony. This is one of their organizing principles, one of their wants, needs, and expectations. So harmony is, finish the sentence for me, can't we all just get along? Listeners bring this sense of us just being at peace with each other. And by the way, the social sciences indicate that there are more listeners in the general population than all of the other styles. So there are roughly about 30% of the population are listeners. So more listeners than the rest of us, and thank God. Because the literature calls listeners the glue that holds us together. Like, our teams, our organizations would be lost and dysfunctional without our listeners there, because they have this focus on harmony. Now, just think about what this brings to a team. I mean, they bring balance and moderation. They bring a sense of stability. They bring relationship building. They're really good at helping people smooth over conflict and find harmony, helping people find compromise. They just work really well with others, and again, bring this sense of peacefulness. Now, with all of these organizing principles, with all of these strengths, there's a flip side to them, right? A quality in one context is absolutely a strength, and a quality misused or in a different context can be a liability or weakness. So let's talk about where this focus on harmony might get in their way or other people's way. One way it can be an obstacle for them is listeners sometimes have a hard time speaking their truth, or when they speak their truth, it's a bit coded. If that truth might be hard to hear, they're going to struggle a little bit with that. And listeners tend to get misread because of this, right? We think they're with us, we think they're okay, but they're not because they didn't express their wants and needs clearly. Or over time, they start to feel a little bit burnt out or taken advantage of. Now, that phrase, feeling a bit taken advantage of, this will come up again several times as we talk about their organizing principles. Because the one thing we know about listeners is just with all the qualities and great things they bring to the world, depending on how they're seeing their environment, they can sometimes feel taken advantage of. So again, like with listeners, it's like, hey, are you really okay with that extra task? Or are you just avoiding saying no? Or are you saying that you don't want to do this extra task or you do because it's not really clear to me? Right? They're kind of beating around the bush a little bit because it might be hard for that person to hear that what they're saying is no, I can't do this extra task. So they're going to work hard to please others. Let's put it that way. They're going to work hard to please others. And when they go too far with that, they can end up losing a bit of themselves along the way, right? What they need. And then again, later, they can feel taken advantage of, like their needs are not being met, when in reality, they just weren't always super clear about what their needs were. So again, they can tend to be more conflict avoidant is one way to think about it, because they want to maintain that harmony. Now, ironically, this can sometimes cause people to lose trust in our listeners because these listeners are not being clear about what they need and what they want. And so we feel like we're not kind of getting their honest self at times, which can erode trust a little bit if we're not careful. This is before we're making some adjustments to improve the way we show up in our emotional IQ. All right, so that's all about number one, harmony. Number two is to help others. The type of people that are going to show up early to help set up, to stay late to help clean up, right? They generally don't mind being delegated to either, right? They see that as helpful. One time we said that in a workshop, they don't mind being delegated to, and I had two conductors in the corner of the room looking and writing down the names of all the listeners in the room. So don't take it too far, folks. But to help others, I mean, this is one of the ways they feel valued by being there to help. Okay? Listeners, they love to help. They bring a value that way. By the way, for all of our listeners listening to this episode right now, if you do want to help us here on the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast, could you just go ahead and leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to this? Leaving us a review, it helps spread the word, helps other people find the show. Thank you. All right, so back to our listeners. Again, to help others, they don't mind being asked to do things normally. But if they're doing all these things to help, they're going to need a little bit of appreciation, which brings us to our third organizing principle for them, appreciation. Now, they don't need a parade thrown in their honor. They just need to know what they're doing to be helpful is actually helpful and appreciated. It helps them know that they're caring and helping like it actually matters. And again, it's one of the ways they feel valued. And if they don't feel appreciated, over time, once again, they're going to feel taken advantage of, which can cause them stress. It can cause them to burn out. And we do not want our listeners to burn out. And I'll tell you why. When a promoter says, I hate my job, that might mean the copier jammed. When an analyzer says, I hate my job, that means they hate their job because they're accurate and honest. When a listener says, I hate my job, it might mean they've hated their job for a long, long time and they've kept it to themselves and now it's too late. Right? They're pulling the plug without any warning. And we've lost out on the opportunity to problem solve. And this can sometimes happen with listeners. They don't speak up and they're not feeling appreciated, but they want to maintain harmony, and then it just boils over and we've lost them. This actually happened to me before. I had an employee, and this is actually a little bit embarrassing to admit, but like I had this employee who was just constantly volunteering to help out on people's projects. These were projects she wasn't assigned to. I didn't even know she was helping out on these projects behind the scene, but she was constantly doing this stuff, just volunteering to help people out. And so one time, I had these 4 team members that were assigned to a project, and they completed the project. It went smashingly. And we're in a team meeting, and I give a shout out to these 4 team members. Hey, you folks over here, I just want to say, incredible job on the project, on time, on budget. It exceeded the quality that I could have hoped for. Thank you very much. And you know who I didn't give a shout out to? This listener on my team. Because A, I didn't even know she was helping on this project substantially, but she was. And B, I never took the time to figure out or to learn that she was helping. And me not giving her a shout out here, this was like almost the straw that broke the camel's back. It burned her. And she was in my office the next day ready to quit. And in this meeting with her, she told me 3 other times I never appreciated her for helping out. Now look, obviously as the manager of this group, this was at least partially on me of not taking the time to understand and learn about all these ways she was contributing. And at the same time, it's also on her, right? For not speaking up about her needs and wants. More than the other styles, we find that listeners can struggle with not being able to let go of relational wounds, which can happen when they don't feel appreciated. And they can just kind of let it sit there and let that wound fester, and it's not addressed, and others don't even know they've created a wound, and then it's too late. They're done. So the adjustment here is for our listeners to speak up sooner about your wants and needs. Advocate for yourself, because we don't always know. Bottom line, listeners need to feel appreciated. Of course, we all need to feel appreciated. It just hits a little bit higher on the list for listeners. And the cool thing is, listeners are really good at giving appreciation to others, which is why they build really strong relationships and help other people feel seen. All right, number 4 is the opportunities to express empathy. Just know that they're going to find a lot of opportunities to show care towards other people. And we love our listeners for this. They're caring, they listen deeply, right? Big surprise there. People tend to feel heard by them, they tend to feel respected. These are the people that just naturally have really good, active, empathetic listening skills. They do it naturally. What I find is that listeners both feel a lot of empathy towards others and they show a lot of empathy towards others. Okay? They're people we might call empaths. Now, the obvious benefits with that is, again, they build strong relationships. They help build psychological safety on a team. They build trust. They build respect. There's really not a lot of negatives that comes along with somebody that's looking for opportunities to express empathy. And this is why listeners can often make really great leaders. Now, some of the challenges that could come from this is they might have, a hard time making decisions that are going to negatively affect other people. That could slow them way down, or they kind of just make these watered down decisions because they're trying to please everybody with it, but it's not the strong, bold decision that we might need to make. They also might have a hard time giving clear, constructive feedback to people that could be perceived negatively. So I was actually coaching an employee. So I was asked to coach this employee who was put it on a PIP, the dreaded performance improvement plan. So, first I spoke with this person's manager, and this person's manager was a listener. And the manager told me that she had addressed this person's performance 4 or 5 different times and saw no improvement, which is why she's now on a PIP. I then spoke with the employee, and she told me she was never once told that her performance was lacking. So I was like, okay, what is going on here? What is the disconnect? So when I got the 2 of them together to just like, hey, let's figure this out, the picture became clear. Each time the manager thought that she was addressing this person's lack of performance, the employee walked away from that conversation thinking that was a conversation in which she received praise and positive feedback. Like that was the main message she got, is I'm doing well. And why do you think that is? It's because this manager, who's a listener, really couldn't bring herself to clearly state the things that needed to be improved and was struggling communicating the crux of this meeting, which was there's a performance gap and we need to see improvement. And so it led to this unfortunate scenario where this person was now on a pip and had no idea why. So yeah, again, before we're making adjustments, listeners might struggle a little bit with giving clear, direct feedback. But again, the ability to give empathy and show care towards others, not a lot of downsides to that. Now is there? All right, number 5 is low pressure decision making, or we can call it just time to process. Now you saw time to process before when we talked about analyzers. So if you're a listener analyzer, an analyzer listener, time might be amplified for you. However, if you're a listener promoter, for example, you might need a little less time. Or not, because there's lots of different types of people in the world. But this is just how these different primary styles and secondary styles can interact with each other. So here it's, I don't want to be pressured to make decisions right here on the spot, and I'm not going to do that to you either. And we appreciate that from our listeners. We feel comfortable around decision-making processes with them. But let me give you a scenario. Let's say that I am facilitating a meeting and I am a conductor promoter, and you all sitting here in the meeting with me, you all are a bunch of listeners. For some reason, my team, I just inherited a whole bunch of listeners. So again, I'm a conductor promoter, and we're having to make a decision, and I'm doing the kind of conductor thing, which is, hey, folks, let's just make a decision. Let's just move forward. We don't need to talk about this anymore. Let's just move forward. And I'm also doing the promoter thing of like trying to convince you that my idea is the best way to go. Like, folks, don't you think this is a good way to do it? Can I get consensus? Are you all with me on this? Okay. So I'm doing this kind of inappropriate, high pressure decision making thing to you, which again, you all are a bunch of listeners. And as I'm doing this, what I'm getting back from you all in the room is just kind of a pleasant look on your face and nodding your head, which is often the look we see from listeners. A half smile or a neutral face with some head nodding. Now, what does head nodding mean in Western society? It means, yes, we're in agreement. I'm with you. Now, what might that mean to those listeners in the moment who are being pressured to make a decision? It might mean, idiot. I can't believe he's thinking about doing this, but you know what? Head nod, head nod, head nod, harmony, harmony, harmony. And so, as the manager here, I think, okay, great, we're all in agreement. We've made a decision. So I go out and I start doing my thing, and then I hear all this bad mouthing about my decision behind my back. And I think to myself, well, you know what? That's passive aggressive. They sat with me in that meeting and agreed with me, and then disagreed with me behind my back. That's passive aggressive. All right, folks, this is not a totally uncommon scenario I see with listeners mixed with other behavioral style dynamics. Is we think listeners are with you when you're pressuring them because they're trying to maintain harmony. And remember, they're somewhat conflict avoidant. So we think they're with us and they're not. And they kind of quote unquote then punish us later. I don't mean punish us like they're going to go slash our tires. I mean like they start talking about it, right? And we think, well, that's not fair because you all agreed with me in the meeting. So let's reimagine this. First off, if I am that manager in the room making a decision, and I know I have some listeners in the room, and I know that they value low pressure decision making, what might I need to do in that meeting? Well, I probably need to step back and just say, hey, folks, how about we think about this for a day? Or, hey, I want to hear from some people. Let's do a couple small group conversations, get in pairs of 2, talk about what's good about this idea, talk about what you might want to do differently. Everybody take the day, then come back and talk to me about what you think, right? Just taking the pressure off of that moment. Now, if I'm the listener in this meeting and someone's pressuring me to make a decision, what's an adjustment I might need to make? Okay. I might need to just be able to have some courage and speak up and say, hey, you know what? I don't think we're ready to make a decision on this. Can we get some time to think about this? Right? So that dynamic, when both people are making adjustments, we end up getting to better decisions, especially when we recognize that there is at least 30% of the population that don't respond well to high pressure decision making. All right, so low pressure decision making here, again, some of the positives are people feel comfortable around decision making with listeners. And listeners are really good at getting involvement in decisions. Some challenges might be, hey, you think the listeners are with you, but they're not because they're feeling pressured and they need more time. Alrighty, and number 6 is security. This just means that, in a good way at times, listeners are a little bit more likely to worry, want less uncertainty about the future, need to be reassured that everything's going to be all right. And they're really good at giving reassurance to other people that things are going to be all right, which kind of lowers the temperature a bit. All right. Promoters, for example, are more rooted in the now. They're more immediate. Listeners are more rooted in the future. So some positives are I find that listeners are really good at thinking through potential consequences of certain actions and decisions and thinking through change, thinking through how this might affect other people, thinking how it might affect our security in the future. And we need that lens on our decision making and actions. The challenges that can come from this is they might be more risk avoidant. They might work hard to assure other people's to create security, and so they're not taking a bunch of risks, and sometimes we need to be able to take some risks. All right, last but not least is number 7, which is fairness. They have a focus on fairness, which of course is really cool. People should be treated fairly and right, or it really bothers them. People need to be treated well. And we absolutely need people in the workplace to have a heavy focus on this. This is so valuable, especially in management. This is why I find that listeners can sometimes make some of the best leaders because they have this focus on fairness. And by the way, fairness is one of our top 15 management skills we talk about in our leadership programs. So fairness is cool. We want that. Now, you see any challenges that can come along with somebody that's focused on fairness? One that I've noticed is that at times, occasionally, we sometimes get a listener that's kind of, I don't know how to put this, but like waving the flag for the oppressed when there really is nobody oppressed here. Like it's not an issue of fairness, it's just a decision that has to be made that not everybody's going to like or not everybody's going to benefit from equally. All right, folks, so those are our 7 organizing principles for listeners. That's harmony, that's to help others, appreciation, opportunities to express empathy, low pressure decision making, which includes time to process, security, and fairness. There's 7 organizing principles, those 7 wants and needs and expectations of our listeners. All right. So then to close out this episode, we'll do what we've done with each of the other styles, which is talk about, 3 suggestions, 3 big primary suggestions for how you can work effectively with listeners. And then 3 suggestions of what listeners should be careful of, or 3 ways that listeners might need to adjust to be more effective. So let's start with 3 ideas, 3 suggestions for things that we can do or focus on to work effectively with the listeners in our work and life. Number 1 is really value the care, the empathy, and the stability that they bring. Like, look, listeners, they're super, super talented at creating trust, harmony, psychological safety. They're caring, they're dependable, and they just are naturally attentive to other people's needs. And so their ability to listen deeply and help people feel valued strengthens teams and relationships. And it goes a long ways to show that you care and value this care, empathy, and stability that they bring. Suggestion number 2 is give them time and low pressure opportunities to express their thoughts. Listeners just need time to process decisions. And they're not going to speak up if they feel pressured or speak up if they think a disagreement could create conflict. So I find that just by creating some space for reflection and inviting their inputs helps them share what they're really thinking. So rather than assuming they'll speak up if they have something, invite them into the process in a low pressure way. That can go a long ways. And number 3 is just show appreciation and recognize their contributions, which is kind of similar to number 1, but just know that listeners are often helping behind the scenes. And they probably aren't the type of people that seek out attention, but they do want to know that their efforts matter. So genuine appreciation is going to help them feel valued, and it's going to prevent them from feeling unseen, taken for granted, or burnt out. All right? Now, 3 suggestions for listeners. 3 things that listeners might want to be careful of, or 3 areas that they might need to adjust to be more effective in working with others. Number 1 is speak up about your needs and concerns sooner. Look, listeners, you have this desire for harmony, and that is a gift. On the other hand, avoiding difficult conversations or staying silent about what you need can lead you to resentment over time. It can lead you to burnout. It can lead to broken trust with other people. Others cannot respond to needs they do not know about. So speak up about your needs and concerns sooner. Number 2 is remember that caring sometimes requires clarity. Okay? Your empathy, your compassion are strengths. But when we work too hard to protect other people from discomfort, that can prevent you from being able to actually give the honest feedback or have those difficult conversations or make a difficult decision. So clear communication and accountability are often expressions of care, not violations of it. And number 3 is don't lose yourself while helping others. Look, your willingness to serve other people, to support other people is invaluable. And saying yes too often or, prioritizing everybody else's needs above yours can leave you exhausted and can leave you feeling taken advantage of. So healthy boundaries actually allow you to continue caring for others without neglecting yourself. So there you have it, folks. If you've been following the plot and tuning in for these 4 episodes to review the 4 behavioral styles, I appreciate it. Hopefully, this is something that you got value in terms of understanding some ways that you might need to adjust, as well as understanding your strengths that you can leverage, and understanding how to best communicate and work with others. Now, I want to leave you with this thought. Communication happens on the listener's terms. And I don't mean the listener's terms as in the listener, our behavioral style listener, but just in general. Communication happens on the listener's terms. Meaning, what you say and what you express to somebody else is going to be filtered through their own behavioral style, their personality, their biases, their worldview. And so to best communicate with others, to be as effective as possible with communicating and working with others, we need to be able to identify their style and their preferred methods of communication and collaboration and relationship. And when we can identify that, we can communicate on their terms more often, which allows our message to get through more clearly and allows us to just be more functional in our working relationship. All right, folks. Hey, if you've enjoyed this series and if you enjoy this show in general, look, at the best thing you can do for us is to just go leave us a review. Leaving a review helps other people find the show, and it's much appreciated. All right, until next time.